170 kilometers long, 500 meters tall, higher than the Empire State Building. Two mirrored walls of glass, running in a perfect straight line across the Saudi Arabian desert, housing 9 million people, with no cars, no streets, and no carbon. It was called The Line, the crown jewel of NEOM, the most ambitious construction project ever announced by any nation in human history. Original price tag, $500 billion. It is confirmed. Construction on the line has been quietly suspended, and the numbers that leaked out explain exactly why. In September 2025, work on the main sections of the Mirror City stopped. Months later, it still had not resumed. This year, reporting revealed the project has now been formally pushed back until after 2030, with its famous mirrored skyscrapers being completely redesigned. An internal audit leaked to the Wall Street Journal projected the true cost of the full vision at $8.8 trillion, not billion, trillion, roughly 9 times Saudi Arabia's entire annual economy, with an end date stretching to the year 2080. The population target for this decade has collapsed from 1.5 million people to 300,000 to 100,000. The construction workforce has been cut by more than a third. The sovereign wealth fund behind it has written down billions and slashed its construction contracts by 60%. And according to the Financial Times, the Crown Prince himself has privately accepted that his desert dream will be realized as something, quote, far smaller. The renders promise the future. The desert is issuing the invoice. This is the story of the most expensive line ever drawn on a map, what was actually built, what was quietly stopped, and why the greatest megaproject collapse of our lifetime happened almost silently behind mirrors. To be fair to what comes later in this video, you first have to feel the full size of the promise, because nothing this large has ever been pitched by a government, anywhere, in the history of governments. NEOM was unveiled in 2017 as the centerpiece of Saudi Vision 2030, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's grand program to rebuild the kingdom's economy for the day the oil age ends. NEOM would be a brand new region in the empty northwest corner of the country on the Red Sea, a land the size of a small European nation, run on futuristic technology and clean energy. Early internal documents reported by the international press described ambitions that read like science fiction pitched with a straight face: flying taxis, robotic services, even an artificial moon. The message was unmistakable. This was not a real estate project. This was a nation announcing it intended to build tomorrow, wholesale from sand. Then in January 2021 came the reveal that swallowed the world's attention: The Line. A city 170 kilometers long and only 200 meters wide, formed by 2 parallel skyscrapers taller than almost anything in the Western Hemisphere. Their outer faces clad entirely in mirrors, running dead straight from the Red Sea coast deep into the desert. No roads, no cars, no emissions. 9 million residents stacked into a vertical ribbon, every daily need reachable within a 5-minute walk, end to end, connected by a high-speed rail line, making the full run in 20 minutes. The Crown Prince introduced it personally, describing it as a civilizational revolution that put people first, and the world's reaction split instantly and permanently into 2 camps that have never reconciled. Half the planet saw the future finally being funded, and the other half saw the most expensive piece of concept art ever commissioned. Both camps shared one certainty: nobody had ever seen anything like it. The renders were, honestly, the most spectacular architectural images ever released. A silver blade laid across the wilderness, glowing at sunset, disappearing into its own reflection. Put yourself in the boardroom of any global engineering firm that week. The proposal on the table violates half of what your profession knows about cities, structures, and deserts. And attached to it is the deepest, sovereign checkbook on Earth, asking one question: can you start Monday? That is why the world's engineering firms did not laugh. They mobilized, and The Line was only the flagship. NEOM's fleet included Oxagon, a floating industrial port city shaped like an octagon on the Red Sea; Trojana, a ski resort in the Saudi mountains with real outdoor skiing in the Gulf, already awarded the honor of hosting the 2029 Asian Winter Games; Sindalah, a luxury yacht island for the global elite; and a green hydrogen plant the size of a small industry, meant to power the whole experiment. Total announced budget, $500 billion, bankrolled by the kingdom's public investment fund, the deepest sovereign pockets on Earth. The world's contractors signed on from every continent because whatever anyone privately thought of mirrored cities and desert skiing, $500 billion is a serious client. At its peak, the NEOM ecosystem employed over 115,000 workers and contractors across more than 100 active sites. In a single year, they moved 20 million cubic meters of Earth. Satellite photos showed something genuinely astonishing: a dead-straight excavation trench, kilometers upon kilometers long, cut into the desert floor, the foundation scar of the line visible from orbit. The dig was real. The concrete was real. Millions of cubic meters poured. Pile foundations went down. The first mirrored facade panels were tested, which is exactly what makes what happened next so remarkable. Because this was not a paper project that quietly never started. This was a project that started at full roar, and then the desert, the physics, and the spreadsheet all raised their hands at the same time. Start with the engineering, because the line was not just ambitious. It was a collection of problems no one has ever solved, stacked 500 meters high. Problem 1. No structure remotely like this has ever existed. A building 170 kilometers long must survive thermal expansion across a desert where surface temperatures swing wildly between night and day, steel and glass growing and shrinking along a distance greater than the length of some countries. Problem 2. The signature mirrors. A 500-meter reflective wall in one of the sunniest places on Earth is a solar furnace question. A bird migration hazard flagged by conservationists, the site sits on major flyways, and a maintenance bill without precedent. Every sandstorm redecorates your national monument. Problem 3. Water. 9 million people in one of the driest landscapes on the planet means desalination at a scale that would rank among the world's largest utilities on its own, with all the energy and brine that implies. Problem 4. The one that quietly terrified urban planners. A line is mathematically the worst possible shape for a city. Every efficient city on Earth is a blob for a reason. Blobs minimize the distance between any 2 points. Stretch 9 million people into a ribbon 170 kilometers long, and you have engineered maximum distance between your own citizens. Then bet everything on a single rail spine, where one failure strands a nation-sized population in a hallway. Any one of these might have been solvable with enough genius and enough money. But that is where the second wall arrived, the arithmetic. Because Vision 2030 was not building one moonshot, it was building all of them at once. NEOM, plus new airlines, plus global sports empires, plus, critically, the confirmed obligations of hosting Expo 2030 in Riyadh and the FIFA World Cup in 2034, events with hard deadlines and non-negotiable stadium bills. All of it funded by oil revenue in years when oil prices ran softer than the kingdom's budget required. Something, somewhere, had to give. And in a contest between stadiums the world will watch in 2034 and a mirror, the desert will hide until 2080, the outcome was never really in doubt. The signals came in sequence, each one small enough to deny. In 2024, reporting revealed the first Great Retreat. The line's 2030 population target, once 1.5 million people, had been cut to roughly 300,000, with the buildable scope for this decade shrinking from 170 kilometers toward a first module of around 2.5. Later, the target fell again to as low as 100,000. The founding chief executive departed. His successor was handed a mandate with a very corporate name and a very sharp blade, a full strategic review. Vendors began reporting delayed payments. And in September 2025 came the moment this video is named for. Construction on the line's main sections was suspended, not announced with a press conference, not mourned with a statement, simply stopped. Months later, the cranes had still not restarted. The workforce was down by more than a third. And a European contracting giant confirmed that NEOM had terminated its contract for the high-speed rail connector, the transportation spine of the whole concept, with the work only 1/5 complete. For a project this famous to go this quiet, the numbers behind the curtain had to be extraordinary. In early 2026, the world found out just how extraordinary, because an internal audit leaked to the Wall Street Journal, and it remains one of the most staggering documents in the history of construction. The audit's projected cost to reach NEOM's full end-state vision, $8.8 trillion. Let me put that number where it belongs. It is roughly 17 times the original announced budget. It is approximately 9 times the entire annual economic output of Saudi Arabia. It exceeds the combined market value of the largest companies on Earth. It is, by any sane measure, not a budget. It is a mathematical proof that the vision, as sold, cannot be purchased. And the leaked timeline agreed. Full realization by around 2080, 60 years out, with even the first phase projected at $370 billion and stretching to 2035. The kingdom's sovereign wealth fund, meanwhile, booked an $8 billion write-down on its giga projects and slashed its construction, contracting by 60%, with the freed capital flowing, exactly as predicted, toward the stadiums of 2034 and the pavilions of Expo 2030. Then came the quiet public confirmations, each phrased with the gentleness reserved for enormous embarrassments. The fund's governor, on the record, no projects are canceled. They are being reprioritized, and the line he allowed would be good to have by 2030, but is not essential. Translate that from finance into English. The flagship of the century is now optional. Reporting this May went further. Work on the line formally pushed until after 2030. The mirrored twin skyscrapers, the entire visual identity of the project, being significantly redesigned, which is the polite way of saying the mirrors as promised are gone. Trojana, the desert ski resort, was reported frozen for new investment until after 2030 as well, despite being the contracted host of the 2029 Asian Winter Games, a fixture that now hangs in open uncertainty. And behind all of it, the Financial Times reported the sentence that ends the argument. The Crown Prince himself has privately accepted the original vision will be realized as something far smaller. No cancellation ceremony, no headline saying dead, just a suspension that never lifts, a deadline that moves past the horizon, a redesign that dissolves the signature, and a budget document that proves the ending in advance. This is how the largest projects die in the modern era, not with demolition, but with adjectives: reprioritized, phased, deferred, not essential. The desert does not need to reclaim the line the way the sea reclaims Dubai's islands. The desert's method is simpler. It just waits for the meetings to end. Now, honesty requires the other side of this ledger, because NEOM is not a mirage, and what survives the Great Shelving tells you exactly what was ever real. The green hydrogen plant, an $8.4 billion industrial facility, built with serious international partners, stands at roughly 80% complete, the single most advanced piece of the entire NEOM ecosystem. Sindola, the luxury island, is nearly finished and aimed at welcoming guests. The ports, the logistics zones, the data center deals, including major new technology infrastructure contracts, are moving forward. Notice the pattern. Everything surviving is something the world already knows how to build, with customers who already exist, generating revenue on timelines measured in years, not generations. The hydrogen plant survives because industry buys hydrogen. The port survives because ships need ports. The island survives because billionaires need marinas. The 170-kilometer mirror dies because its only customer was the future. And the future, it turns out, does not sign contracts. And the 2.5-kilometer first module of the line, it may yet rise someday in some redesigned form, a fragment of the blade built at fantastic expense, standing in the desert as the world's most expensive proof of concept. If it does, it will join a very particular family we have met throughout this series. Dubai's world map dissolving in the Gulf, the ghost palm that sat empty for 15 years, the trench in the Saudi desert visible from space. Monuments, not to failure of imagination, none of these people lacked imagination, but to the oldest gap in human ambition, the distance between announcing the future and paying for it. Because that is the true through line of this entire series, and NEOM states it more purely than any sinking island ever could. In Dubai, the sea collects unfunded sand at millimeters per year. In Osaka, clay collects an airport at centimeters per year. In Jakarta, an emptied aquifer collects a megacity at inches per year. And in the Saudi desert, no water is needed at all, because the collector there is arithmetic itself. Nature runs many agencies. Every one of them gets paid. So where does history file the line? Give the ambition its due first, because ridicule is too easy. A nation staring at the end of its oil century chose to attempt the most radical urban experiment ever conceived. With its own money, in its own desert, and in the wreckage of the retreat, real things remain. A hydrogen industry, ports, a transformed country that looks nothing like it did a decade ago. There are far worse ways for a kingdom to spend a fevered dream. And the decision to quietly fold rather than pour trillions into a mathematically impossible promise may honestly be the most rational act in this entire story. But the Mirror City itself now belongs to a very old genre. Every civilization wealthy enough eventually draws its perfect city. Babel had a tower, the pharaohs had their eternal capitals, the 20th century had its radiant utopias on paper, and almost every one of them ends the same way, partially excavated, quietly deferred, survived by its own renders. The line's true completion date was never 2030 or 2080. Its real destiny was always to become what it is right now. The most beautiful architectural images ever produced, attached to a trench in the desert, attached to an audit that says 8.8 trillion, attached to a suspension notice nobody ever read aloud. So the verdict goes to you, and I want the dreamers and the accountants in this audience to fight it out below. The line. Was it a necessary moonshot, the kind of impossible target that drags a whole nation's capabilities forward even in failure, leaving hydrogen plants and ports where there was only sand? Or was it the most expensive rendering in human history, $8.8 trillion of honesty purchased at the cost of a decade and a workforce of 100,000? And answer me the question the brochures never dared ask. If the Mirror City had actually been finished, 500 meters tall, 200 meters wide, one hallway 170 kilometers long, would you have moved in? The comments are open. Every answer gets read.